Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here. Time for the hurricane outlook and discussion from Monday, the 11th day of July, 2022. Hope your week is going well. We've got a lot to talk about today. A system trying to get organized, eventually maybe over the northern Gulf of Mexico. And then I want to talk about Darby in the eastern Pacific. A reminder that rapid intensification is still a problem. Luckily, Darby is well away from land areas, but definitely a reminder that we have to watch out for these rapidly intensifying hurricanes, especially when they could potentially be close to land. We'll talk about that and much more as we progress through today's update. First, the anomalies map. Still have the La Nina generally holding on in the Pacific. It's moderated a little bit here. Some positive anomalies have shown up, but a very strong period of easterly trades, a strong trade burst as we call it, where the trade winds are really rushing through the deep tropics down there, has recently probably set off what we call an upwelling Kelvin wave. Basically, this map is probably going to look different in the next week to 10 days, so we'll take a look at it next week and see if some of those positive anomalies right down here get eroded away as colder water from below gets upwelled because of the very strong trade winds that we saw recently across this portion of the tropical Pacific. And in the meantime, the Atlantic Basin generally warmer than average out here in the deep tropics. The Gulf of Mexico is just ridiculously warm overall. In my What's Up in the Tropics this morning, I cited a tweet from Michael Lowry mentioning that there was a weather station and a buoy or whatever it was, some type of a temperature gauge, not far from Grand Isle, Louisiana, that recently reported a water temperature, the surface water temperature of 92 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. It's very, very warm in the Gulf of Mexico. Most of the western Atlantic is not only warm, but warmer than it should be. So the main development region has not cooled off very much lately, despite pretty solid outbreaks of African dust and the Saharan air layer overall. And as we get towards the end of the month, I think we will see a reversal of the trade winds out here a little bit, and we should start warming this back up even more as we get ready for prime time in August and September and beyond. So actual sea surface temperatures, in case you're wondering, 26 degrees Celsius, that's just about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Where is that line? Well, we call that an isotherm, the line of equal temperature. And here it is roughly right here. I try to outline it in black and just kind of generally show you that everything, with the exception of just a few areas in here, south of this line is all 26 Celsius or warmer. The Outer Banks of North Carolina, the inland waterways down here, all throughout the coastal waters down to South Carolina, Georgia, and east of Florida, about 26, 27, 28 Celsius, basically low 80s Fahrenheit. So if you want to head to the beach, now's a good time to do so. The water temperatures are nice and warm, and they will continue to warm right on through the rest of July and into August, even though we've already had our longest day back in June, around the 20th, 21st, somewhere around there. There's a lag effect. The oceans continue to warm even as the days grow shorter, and we eventually head towards fall. I don't want to think about fall. I like summer. But anyway, yep, the water temperature is nice and warm along the mid-Atlantic and the southeast. Very warm to ridiculous in the Gulf of Mexico. These 31 Celsius numbers here, that is just crazy. Again, I think that's the largest area of 31 Celsius that I've ever seen. And look at this gradation right in here, this deeper color of red all through here. We're knocking on the door of 32 Celsius, and Grand Isle is located right here. That's where that 92 degree Fahrenheit, that's close to 32, 33 Celsius. Wow. Even up here in the Big Bend of Florida, through the Nature Coast, Tampa, St. Pete, down beyond there, not far from Fort Myers and Naples, just north of you guys. Very, very warm, 31 Celsius, close to the shelf there, and the coastal waters. I mean, how do you enjoy that? I mean, you go to the beach and it's 88 degrees outside, and then you get in the water and it's 89 degrees in the water. Like, oh, I went down to the Keys last year on vacation with the family, and I remember it was so warm down there and in Naples. Went to a beach in Naples, and that's exactly what it was. You walked from hot air to hot water. But anyway, this is a lot of fuel for hurricanes later on. And look at the 30 degrees Celsius line here, covering almost the entire northern 2/3 of the Gulf of Mexico. Once we get into prime time, this is really going to matter. A lot of extra energy, and it's pumping humidity and just ridiculous dew points in across the southeast. I tell you, it's just a strange pattern out there, and that water is anomalously warm. It's way above where it should be. All right, so that's sort of a setup to where we're going to go from here, and that'll be to this. We are watching an area down here, 30% chance of development over the next 5 days. Not an invest yet. It's not whatever it's going to be, 95L or something like that, 94, 95. I don't know where we are on the invest numbers, but it might get tagged eventually. That's the 2-day. This is the 5-day, and it could just kind of mill around down here, and we'll look at this in more detail in just a moment. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Pacific, there's Darby, 125 mile per hour winds, so almost a Category 4. We're going to look at a beautiful satellite picture of that, actually an animation in just a moment. The air pressure estimated down to 965 millibars. The way they do this, by the way, out in the Pacific, when these are far from land, there's no recon out there. It's not necessary. Maybe if they wanted to do some research or something. But it's all based on satellite estimates. There's an advanced technique that's used by different agencies where they use previous information from previous strong hurricanes to objectively try to understand how strong these hurricanes that are not recon checked out are. Does that make sense? So these are all excuse me, satellite estimates when they're way out in the open ocean. So here is the satellite animation courtesy of Tropical Tidbits of most of the Western Hemisphere. Let's switch colors over here. What will pop out better? Let's try this blue color. So we've got this front that came off, and the tail end of it extends out into the Gulf. And it's this tail end down here that we have to watch for potential development. Elsewhere, really not much going on. A pretty good TUT sitting out here. Tropical upper tropospheric trough outlined in there. I'll show it to you in just a moment on a different perspective. So the upper level winds out ahead of that, let's highlight it in yellow. These are all pretty strong, cutting out of the south-southwest. So any tropical waves coming in off of Africa from stage right there, or screen right or whatever, they're going to run into a lot of shear down here. And that's typical for July. This is also fairly typical for July. June and July are pretty big months usually in the Eastern Pacific. This is not too unusual to see, even in a La Nina situation. You know, the conditions out there where Darby formed were just right. The upper level anticyclone sitting over the top of it, what we call a ULAC, upper level anticyclone, ULAC for short, is perfectly positioned to just vent this system and allow that upward motion that's happening from the bottom up. Those hot thunderstorm towers, as we call them, actually cold, but we call them hot towers, is they're warm. They release a lot of heat, but the tops of them are very cold, way up in the, almost touching the stratosphere. A lot of lightning in this thing the last couple of, well, not couple of days, because it's gone from almost nothing to this, really the last 12 hours or so. A lot of lightning with this system. We'll look at it more closely in just a moment. But overall, the pattern is pretty quiet, except for Darby, and just some disturbed areas of weather here in the Gulf, which we'll examine more as we progress. But let's look at Darby first of all. Visible satellite shot. It looks a lot like Hurricane Andrew did as it approached Florida. If you go look at old Hurricane Andrew satellite pictures, it looks a lot like Andrew, but these cloud tops are not quite pressing up against the stratosphere like Andrew did. Andrew had a much colder, and this is not showing the infrared. In fact, let's switch over to the infrared so I can show you that. Andrew had colder cloud tops, and here's the infrared. We'll do this right here. And the colors of the cloud temperatures are important because that tells us how high in the atmosphere they are reaching. Darby definitely has this perfectly round eye, some pretty cold cloud tops right there at the end, but it's not encircling the entire core. So it's strong, but it's not Category 5 strong like Andrew. And that's what I was saying about using objective techniques based on past experiences with hurricanes. We can look at something like this and say, all right, that's strong, but there are different characteristics about it that tell us that if you flew recon in there, the air pressure would be so-and-so and the wind speeds would probably be so-and-so as well, just based on past observations that were matched with not only satellite but also recon. Anyway, it's a beautiful satellite animation, mainly and exclusively here because it's way out in the ocean. Not bothering anybody. Hopefully all the ships out there are avoiding this area. But it does bring to mind the dangers, and this is a danger, of rapid intensification as we track Darby. That's a very, very important thing to note. And here's what I want to talk about that and show you. This is the first advisory that was written by Philippe Papin down at the National Hurricane Center just 2 days ago. This came out at 3 o'clock Mountain Time on Saturday. Today's Monday, right? So 2 days later, the original forecast for this, and this is not a knock at all. They know that the least amount of skill is still with intensity forecasting. It was 40 miles per hour 2 days ago. Today it's sitting at 125. That is quite a remarkable achievement. And the forecast from then until now, not even 48 hours out, we'll call it 36, was to be about 75 miles per hour. If we stretch it and say 48 hours out, sure, fine, we can do that. We'll be a little bit more liberal with it and call it 85 miles per hour. 125 is still greater than 85, if my math serves me, right? It is. It was never forecast to reach where it is now, even in the longer term. 90 miles per hour, 80 knots, 90 miles per hour. And it just encountered some very favorable conditions. And this is a reminder that these hurricanes can do that even in environments where it doesn't seem like conditions are perfect. And we think about Michael in 2018, and some of the very first forecasts for the Michael situation were that Michael would be maybe a Category 1 hurricane at landfall somewhere near Panama City and vicinity a few days after its inception down there in the Caribbean back in October, I tell you, of 2018. Look what Michael did. Darby is a reminder of that. And if these hurricanes do this on their approach to the Florida Keys, as an example, or up in the area of Florida where Michael went in, we only had a couple of days notice that it was really going to try to ramp up, but nobody expected Cat 5 with Michael, but that's exactly what it was. Darby, a stark reminder here that yes, the dangers of rapid intensification are still there, and it's nice when these are way out in the open ocean, but what if they are not going forward? We don't want to ignore that possibility. All right, moving on along, Vorticity signature time, one of my favorite of the sort of clue hunting, and that's what I'm doing. I'm looking for clues. It's like a mystery. We should get Scooby and Shaggy and all them. That's almost got the colors of the Mystery Machine, doesn't it? Seriously, we're looking to see, trying to unwrap the mystery of when does tropical development happen? When do we need to start looking at things? And this is a great tool for that, the vorticity, taking that energy and bundling it. And here's what I mean by that. This is your vorticity, or spin in the atmosphere, but it's stretched out linearly over thousands of miles. It's not bundled together. Down in the Gulf of Mexico, it is trying to bundle just a little bit, but it's relatively weak, as indicated by the scale over here. That's not, you don't have a lot of spin there. There's just not a lot going on. And there's a lot more to it than I want to get into on this discussion. But the simple thing is, and a lot of you that watch my videos, you already know this, and that's understandable if you want to skip past it. But this is what we're looking for. Do we have any areas that are coming together? There's one area out here coming in near the Cape Verde Islands or Cabo Verde Islands, whichever you prefer. But there's some pretty good dry air out there. But we'll have to watch that. That is one of those little areas. That's your vorticity. That is your fingerprint, your thumbprint of what we like to watch for. And if it persists, if it gets more organized and it stays round in its appearance, then we know we might be onto something that could potentially develop further as time goes on. All right, so I was talking about the TUT earlier, the Tropical Upper Tropospheric Trough. You might be looking at this and going, what am I looking at? Well, there's the east coast of the U.S., as I outline it for you here, the Carolinas and Florida. Just going to kind of leave it there. And there's Bermuda, all right? And this would be Puerto Rico over here. And here is Haiti and the Dominican Republic. and there's Jamaica and the northern coast of South America. You got me? So here in the atmosphere, you have this little area, well, it's pretty large, of tropical upper tropospheric troughing. It's pretty high in the atmosphere, way up there where the commercial airliners fly, and we have this sort of cyclonic turning, but not all the way. It's not closed off, but it's definitely converging air coming together there. It's in a trough position, but it's way up high in the atmosphere, and it creates shear on the southeast side of it over here, very strong wind shear. The whole thing is just very unfavorable. So if we had a hurricane that was trucking into this from the east, it would get torn apart. This is not a favorable signature for tropical development. Interestingly enough, though, let's get rid of the telestration for just a moment. Some of the guidance is indicating that this TUT feature, which is fairly permanent out in the Atlantic during the hurricane season, is going to lift pretty far to the north and just kind of be sitting out here like this once we get to August and September and maybe into October. And if that happens, then you have much more of a clear area down here for tropical cyclones to have a favorable path for development and a track west as they stay fairly intense. So that's something we'll have to look for as we go forward. But for now, the TUT is there, and it's not very favorable out there. Also, it's not favorable in the Atlantic right now from a instability standpoint. And what I mean by that, all this brown is a great color that Dr. Cowan has used to indicate lower levels of humidity. All of this area through here, drier air. It's not dry like Phoenix dry, all right, but the humidity values in here are pretty low. Phoenix, I don't know what, I mean, the relative humidity out there is like 2 or whatever, and some of these values through here are pretty low, 10, 15, 20%. That's low, definitely. And so the greens, on the other hand, is where you have a lot more moisture, and there are some areas of green through here, but the dry air mostly dominates the Atlantic right now, and it's going to stay that way for the time being. And let's look at that over the next 10 days or so, all right? 24, 48 hours out, lots of dry air. Now, this is interesting. Look right here. We go back. That little piece right there, this little guy right here, is part of the energy that I was showing you on the vorticity map, which I've gotten rid of already. Nope, there it is. It's a little bit related to this. That's a little bit farther north, but that little tropical wave sitting out here, the GFS is picking it up, and you can see that there. This is 12 hours. This is valid about right now, or a few hours from now. So there's some energy up here, but the moisture is farther to the south. Maybe that energy gets transferred to that area of moisture, and we try to get something to develop. The GFS suggesting it as we go out into time. You can see that there. It's kind of spinning and rotating, 1013, 1014 millibar surface low, a little kink in the wind flow right there. Right here, you can see the turning of the wind field overall and the isobars. Interesting. You never know. A little tropical wave trying to get a little bit more active there and a little bit more moisture. You see how everything kind of breaks apart, all that brown breaks apart a little bit, so that by about day 5 and 6, this tropical wave enters into the eastern Caribbean with more dry air coming behind it, no doubt. It's still July. That's very common to see. But anyway, that'll be interesting to watch, and maybe some of that moisture makes it over to the islands, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, where you still very much need it. And then finally, if we keep going out, we're going to look at out to day 10, 240 hours out, still a lot of dry air sitting out across the Atlantic. This is July 21st, not quite August. Pretty good tropical wave showing up way out in time there. You can tell it even looks like a little wave there. But we're not quite there yet. It's going to be probably another month until the pattern changes and all that dry air lifts to the north. You have more moisture coming out of Africa, and just the overall pattern changes. That's what a lot of the guidance is suggesting once we get to the end of July, which this is only taking us out to the last 10 days right before that. You know what I'm saying? We get to the 21st, we still have almost 10 days left. So 2/3 of July gone by the time we get to when this map is valid, another third to go. So a lot can change in those 10 days. All right, another perspective of this for the Gulf of Mexico disturbance down here. Yep, a lot of moisture with it, but there's still a good amount of dry air to the north. Big, hot, high pressure, big area of sinking air all across much of the mid part of the continent right now. Heat advisories, you're talking triple digits over a huge area. So yeah, a lot of dry, sinking, compressed air. But the Gulf is warmer than average, so there is some moisture and energy available down there. Does it do anything? It tries to. This is 48 hours out. GFS indicating a little bit of a concentration of the moisture there, almost like a little curlicue, right into southeast Louisiana, so potentially some heavy rain, maybe some very heavy rain. And the GFS, anyway, kind of just makes little of it overall. It just becomes part of the overall muggy air mass down here in the deep south. So there could be a lot of heavy rain, but just not much in the way of wind or storm surge, as I don't think, unless this can really get out over the Gulf by a couple hundred miles, that this system is going to have much of a chance to really coalesce and make something of itself. But it could bring a lot of heavy rain, and don't forget that rain is an impact. And you guys down there, Baton Rouge, all the way over to Lafayette, you know, at 2016, Barry in 2019, but especially 2016, even an unnamed disturbance can bring you a nightmare scenario with too much rainfall. Interestingly enough, looking at the Euro here, this is the new one that Dr. Cowan put up where it's every 3 hours. This is that vorticity signature part of the chart that I was showing you, whereas this was your relative humidity. This is vorticity. So let's just move this out and see what happens with it here. You see this system down here we're watching right here, by the way, in the Gulf. Does anything come of that? And we can move this out and see. The Euro tries to keep it down there for a while. This is 96 hours. Then finally by day 5, yeah, a little bit more enthusiastic is the Euro, a little bit, and it kind of mills around. If this happens, by the way, where the Euro just keeps it down here for the better part of a week, that is a lot of potential rainfall for southern Louisiana, definitely. And you got this big old area of high pressure sitting out here. It looks like a big fried egg sitting there. And then there's that tropical wave that was on the GFS that pushes through the islands as well. So, you know, there's a few things going on. Nothing pressing in terms of a named storm or a hurricane, no, but that right there, if the Euro is right, or if it's just a blend between the Euro and the GFS, you kind of meld the two together, well, this tells the tale real nicely right here. Very, very heavy rainfall, the bullseye of which is mostly offshore, but there's some of southeast Louisiana down here, and we're talking, look right there, between 15 and 20 inches on the legend. Now, this is a composite. It is, you know, not a forecast. It's more of a guidance tool. The total precipitable water quantitative precipitation forecast, you add it all up, kind of like an ensemble way of looking at it, a worst case scenario, still 15 inches of rain, that's a lot of rain. And that, if that shifts northwest just a little bit, and even if it's just 9 to 12 inches of rain and you get into greater New Orleans, maybe Biloxi, maybe Baton Rouge, maybe Lafayette, we'll have to wait and see. This could end up being a real pain in the neck, even though it doesn't have a name. And the next name, by the way, in the Atlantic is Danielle. So we've got to really watch this closely. I'll certainly keep an eye on it. A lot of people remember that August 2016 flood event down there, and they remember it in a very painful way. That was terrible. So we don't want to let this kind of get snuck in because it doesn't have a name and people aren't paying attention. With everything else going on in the world, it might get past you. So it's up to us to talk about it, discuss it, and make sure that you are aware. All right, so that's what I'll do. That's it. We covered a lot today. These are always pretty lengthy on Mondays, as I try to go over a lot more than just a broad brush approach to everything. So I think we covered what we needed to cover. All right, don't forget, in the mornings I usually post, well, so far so good, I haven't missed a day since June 1st, the What's Up in the Tropics segment, a very brief look at what I'm looking at for the day ahead. You know, like, what's up in the tropics today? That's literally what it's all about. That's on YouTube, and CJ puts those on Facebook most of the time, especially when I upload them to his folder to do so. And we'll keep on doing that each and every morning here throughout the rest of the hurricane season. And then on most afternoons, I put the hurricane outlook and discussion up, and we see what's happening out there. Should do that again tomorrow, by the way. Doing a little bit of traveling with the family right now, but even on the road, I can still do this. Alrighty, you guys have a great rest of your Monday. Thanks as always for giving me a part of your day. I do appreciate it. As always, I hope you learned something too. That's a big part of it. I'm Mark Sudduth. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow morning.